All right, welcome back to a new episode of Two Plain Sports. We've got Brum joining us today. For those of you that are new, I know we haven't introduced ourselves. I'm Jose. This guy on my left is Brumbaugh, and then the other guy that joined us the other times is Brandon. Thank you guys all for watching and subscribing. If for those of you who are new, for anyone watching that hasn't been here before, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. We really appreciate that you do. It helps us out a lot, obviously, and make sure you're hitting the like before you leave. Big importance there on hitting the like button. We helps us reach a bigger audience and obviously gets us to continue growing like we have been. So for this video, we're going to recap the Texas Tech game. So after Kansas, I think it was fair to say a lot of us were probably a little bit down on this team, thinking that the defense was back to how Mike Stoops had it back in the good old days of having to just shoot out everyone. But luckily, it didn't seem that way. But before we get to the defense, let's touch on the offense because I think we saw something amazing out of a true freshman in Caleb Williams. He became the third player in Oklahoma football history to throw for 6 touchdowns and 0 turnovers. And he's the first ever true freshman, obviously, to do so. Only other guys that did it other than Caleb were Kyler and Baker. So pretty good company. Potential Heisman favorite now that we're getting towards the later part of the season. I don't think anyone's captivated college football quite like him so far. But Brum, you want to give us your thoughts on what you thought about the offense this game?
Yeah, you brought up the potential Heisman campaign. Would I put my money on it? No. But the thing is he's got everything in front of him. I mean, he already had a Heisman moment in that, in that Texas game. And you don't really think about that he would have a Heisman moment against Kansas, but that play was like a Heisman moment. He's got 3 games, the 3 hardest games all year coming up still, 2 on the road, 1 at home, and the Big 12 championship game. If he throws together 4 performances of 4 to 6 touchdowns apiece and 400 yards, total yards, and no one else really separates themselves and maybe loses a few games, some other people lose a few games, he very well might end up at least in New York for the ceremony. He might not win it, but I mean, for a kid that was on the bench for, 4.5 games or whatever it was, to be able to come in and potentially even be a finalist is kind of insane. I thought I would never see it, let alone be a true freshman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's amazing. Sorry, that's all I wanted to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, and no, I mean it's just insane. And one thing I've noticed about him now, it's been 3.5 games, is the kid always has a smile on his face. I don't care if someone runs a route wrong, he makes a bad pass, he gets sacked, anything that goes wrong, it just doesn't bother him. And I think there's something about that everyone just gravitates towards, because some quarterbacks, which is fine, it's just the way they are. Like Spencer didn't play loose. It didn't seem like he was very much, if something went wrong, it was like, oh, that's my bad, I need to figure that out. Like all serious. And not that you can't not be, or not that you don't have to be serious, but at some time you just have to just kind of let loose and just go with it, because you're not going to be perfect. But I just feel like the team, they just want to play for Caleb, and he's a terrific talent, so that helps as well. But that's one takeaway, is just looks like he's having a ton of fun. And when you're having a ton of fun, it seems like everyone else kind of feeds off that energy as a leader. And for him being 18, 19 years old, that's kind of crazy to think about. But this offensive performance is the performance for 4 quarters that we've been looking for all year, because I don't think OU's put together a 4-quarter performance on both sides of the ball all year long. And it's just, they were rolling. I mean, I know we talked about it a little bit before, off camera, like that first touchdown pass where he moved up in the pocket and kind of tucked under a couple defenders and made that pass to Mario Williams. I just, that's a true freshman. I can't believe it. And at that moment, I was like, oh, he's going to play well today. And, it seemed like Lincoln and the Sooners came in with the game plan to not run the ball because they were going to attack the pass defense, and it worked perfect. And it just seemed like they were all on the same page. They were all firing on all cylinders. The offensive line is coming together. I mean, they're still gelling. I still think over the next month or so, they're going to get better, and the bye week's coming at a great time. But it just seemed like they finally clicked. The offensive line's giving him some protection that he needs, and they finally have found their grouping. I mean, there's a lot more I could say, but let me hear what you have to say about the offense that you saw on Saturday.
Yeah. So before I go into that stuff, I do like what you said about his demeanor. It is very different from what we've had at quarterback over the last few years. I mean, Baker wasn't a smiling guy, but he was very much like he's going to hype everyone up. He was a motivator. And then Jalen and Kyler were very stoic, just kind of straight faced. Nothing really ever bothered them, but nothing ever made them smile. It seemed like they were just the same guy all the time, which is great. And obviously it helped them get to where they are now in the NFL. But Caleb's got a personality. While you were talking about it, it kind of reminded me of an Andrew Luck type of dude. Always happy, always smiling, always even congratulating the defense on just absolutely destroying him. I don't think Caleb's doing that, but I mean, these guys are kind of just happy-go-lucky guys. They love the game of football, and people like that. No one wants to be around negativity all the time or hearing how much they're bad or how it was their fault. Not to say anyone did that, but Caleb is obviously a guy that puts everything on his shoulders. If it's a bad route, and obviously a mispass or something, then he might take that and say like, my bad, should have understood what you're doing, something like that. And obviously his guys are receptive to that, and it's working out. But the game overall, I really liked how they gave, like you said, it seemed like the game plan coming in was let Caleb play, let Caleb cook. And if the run game is necessary, we can always fall back on that. And it wasn't necessary at all. I mean, our leading rusher was still Kennedy Brooks with only 35 yards. We only ran it 20 times, and Caleb threw it 30 times. So it obviously worked out. I think not only has he had two big Heisman moments in obviously the comeback against Texas and then the big play against Kansas last week, which is kind of weird, but whatever, helped us get to win the game. But this game, the entire game was a Heisman moment. You don't expect something like this out of a true freshman. This type of performance, you would expect him to make some mistake when you're playing a pretty good school. I mean, they were 5-3, and I know that they had just fired their coach or whatever, but I mean, these guys are still the same talents out on the field. We'd expect him to have maybe one blunder towards the end of the game, but he stayed perfect. He was focused on the game plan, focused on what he was doing, and it was amazing to watch. I think it was also a big game for Mario. He finally got to explode, and at least on the stat sheet, I know he's had some big plays in other games, but what is it, 5 catches, 100 yards, and he had the opening touchdown where the play you just mentioned where Caleb tucked under two defenders to get the ball to the corner of the end zone. I mean, this team is going to be very, very good for a long time. And this offense is starting to look like the offense we all expected under Spencer Rattler. It just happens to be with Caleb Williams. And it was, side note, it was nice to see Spencer come in at the end of the game when it was out of hand, and people were obviously cheering him on and clapping and being great fans that we all should be. And the team obviously rallied around him there at the end when he threw his touchdown pass. Everyone was congratulating him. So that was nice to see at the end of the game.
Yeah. I mean, that catch by Brian Darby, I know it was kind of in garbage time. I mean, he got mauled, and that was ridiculous. I couldn't believe he hauled that in, but that was good to see. Another guy that it seems like the Sooners are really trying to get involved is Trayvon West. He seems to be becoming more and more involved every week, with his speed and everything else. Someone that I know was in garbage time or, late in the game with Spencer in, the second team, was Marcus Major. I know they were, playing tech, and it was late in the game, and they might have had some subs in, but he looked fresh. He looked like he was, he's a bigger guy, and that could be something that we could really need to complement Kennedy Brooks, because Gray is more the pass catching back, third down back, long distance and whatnot. But Marcus Major is another thumper like Kennedy Brooks is. And I think that could really pay dividends, because, I mean, we're 9 games in. It's nice that we have a bye. But, when it comes to November and December, it's a lot of guys are banged up at this point. And he's just really, this is like, the first week or two of him actually, starting to get into play a little bit. And that could definitely pay dividends down the road. And, going back to, Spencer Rattler and Caleb, I will say I'll admit that I was wrong as thinking that, we should continue to start Rattler. I'll own it. But it kind of makes me wonder if the team wasn't playing as well, or they weren't behind Spencer as much because they knew how good Caleb was. And in a way, I kind of wonder if Lincoln was being loyal to Spencer for a while. And I think he was. And I think the team knew it, and they knew who the better of the two quarterbacks was. And they kind of sensed it. And they wanted, because at the end of the day, all you can ask for is, when you compete, you want the best player to play, regardless of whatever position, freshman, senior, whatever. And I think the team sensed it, that Caleb was better, but Spencer's starting because Lincoln's being loyal to him. And it just seems like this team has just flipped a switch. Mims, Mario Williams, Mims is really starting to come on, major for sure. And I really wish we could see Mike Woods. I just want him to get healthy. I really think he could really pay dividends down the road. But I mean, if you got Mario Williams and Mims and Hazelwood, it's looking pretty good. And someone I'm waiting on that I'd like to see more of or more from is Stogner. I still don't know if he's totally right from, that staph infection he dealt with last season. And I don't know if he's 100% right. And it was a very serious deal. I mean, he almost lost his leg at one point. So I don't know. I mean, I can't really complain. I just wish Stogner was a little more involved, and he might over the next month or so. What do you think?
Yeah, I like what you mentioned about Woods. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't remember if he touched the field, but he didn't have anything on the stat sheet. It's interesting. I mean, coming into the year,
he was hurt.
Okay.
Yeah, he was held out.
Okay, so that's good to know. But I mean, it's interesting that, I mean, going into the year, we knew and we discussed this receiving core is very, very good. With the addition in Mike, we had Theo and Hazelwood finally healthy. Unfortunately, obviously, Theo got hurt at the beginning of the year, and hopefully he can come back later on. But Mario was someone we wanted to look out for to have, an impact, and I think he's been more impactful than we believed he was going to be. And Mims, we just expected him to pick up where he left off, and it seems like that's what he's done since Caleb Williams has stepped in as the QB1. And it might be that situation that you discussed. I think it's also, again, going back to the personality, how you mentioned Caleb is just the guy that people rally around, and not to say Spencer isn't that type of dude as well, because at the end of the day, he was voted captain by this football team, so people like him. I think Spencer, it was just too much in his head, thinking about whatever it may be. If it's, I have to do well so that I can get to the NFL and be what people expect me to be. Maybe he was thinking that if he didn't perform well, Caleb might take his spot. Whatever it is that was going on, between the years, it seems like that's what affected him at the end, because Spencer is still extremely talented. I mean, he did a great job in his only drive, and whatever his next step in his career is in football, I think he will do great. If it's transferring to a different school or going to the pros, he will be fine, as long as he doesn't feel potentially threatened by whoever's sitting behind him, and as long as his teammates rally around him.
I mean, let's be honest. You look at the scene of college football, the only two places he would not start is Oklahoma and probably Alabama with Bryce Young. Yep. Outside of that, he would start for every FBS team out there, in my opinion. I mean, he's still that good. I mean, 98 out of 100, he would start. It's just unfortunate he's at one of them that is just so talented. And I mean, it's a great problem to have for the Sooners. And he's definitely going to transfer at the end of the year. And I would not blame him at all, because the way that Williams is playing, there's no reason to really stay. Now, I will say though, just because Williams is starter right now, with him being a little more mobile, we might need Spencer down the road. You never know if Caleb might get hurt on an injury or whatever. I mean, something crazy happens, Spencer's right there, and maybe we need him for the final few games. You never know, and he might come in and tear it up. It's just I don't. I mean, I was glad that he stayed with the team. He came in and everything else, but that's all I've really got on the offense, other than just need some more rest, get Woods healthy, and get Weiss back over the hopefully next few weeks. He'll come back.
Yeah. So before we move on to the defense, Brandon and I talked about it in a video. I think it might have been a couple videos ago, but I wanted to hear your take. Where do you think Spencer transfers after the year ends? And if you don't have like one specific, you can give us a top three.
I mean, I could see Spencer potentially transferring to, he might go home. He might go to Arizona State. I feel like he's going to go to another big time program. I could see him transferring to Clemson, because I don't know what's wrong with DJ Uiagalelei, or however you say his name. Something's not right in Clemson. He might go to Clemson. Definitely not Ohio State, maybe Notre Dame. I mean, I think he's going to find a home in a big time program, but I don't think he's going to stay within the Big 12. I mean, maybe Texas, maybe. I mean, with Thompson and them, that's the only school I could see him staying in the Big 12 for. But I wouldn't also be surprised if he went out west, out to Oregon. Isn't Anthony Brown, isn't he a senior? I can't remember if he is or not, the Oregon quarterback. But I think he's going to land with a big time program.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I just wanted to hear it. Whenever Brandon and I discussed it, he brought up Clemson. He thought that was like the only program that he should even consider, because, I mean, like you said, DJ Uiagalelei is not having a great year so far, and Spencer has the talent to beat him out. Other schools that we mentioned, if you guys didn't catch it, Iowa, their offense is pretty much has zero explosion behind it. So he could definitely add another element to the Iowa offense, and their defense is great. We mentioned ASU as well. And then we also mentioned, what was the other school we mentioned? It doesn't matter. Go back and watch it if you really want to hear our thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I will say Anthony Brown, I just looked it up. He is a senior. Honestly, if that's one spot, if there was one team for me to pick, I'd pick them. The only reason why I wouldn't say Clemson is because he's going to go into a situation where he's at kind of like now, where a very talented guy is right behind him, and someone might be, that might affect him. I don't know. But Oregon, I think there's a spot for him to start with Cristobal.
Yeah, and that'll be something to look at too, Oregon's coaching situation. I know Cristobal's name's been rumored out for like the USC job and the LSU job at the end of the year. So if Cristobal sticks around at Oregon, I could definitely see that happening. I mean, they had Justin Herbert right before him, and that's a guy that had a big arm and made things happen with that offense that Cristobal runs up there. So definitely a good fit potentially, because Spencer has probably one of the biggest arms in college football right now. So could be possible. So let's hop off the offense, shift over to the defense. This defense looked significantly better than it did against Kansas. The defense tied their season high in pass deflections with 5, and it should have been 6 if it wasn't for that absolutely atrocious pass interference call on DJ Graham. And then we also, I believe we had a season high in turnovers. I didn't double check myself there, but we ended up with 4, 2 picks, 2 fumbles. Both the picks were by Justin Broyles and by Pat Fields. So the defense looked a lot better, and I think we can attribute to what we've been just hammering away over the last few weeks. The guys that were injured were significantly more important than some fans like to give credit to. I mean, if you went on Twitter, after the Kansas game, probably even after the TCU game, people were saying like Grinch isn't the answer. Grinch isn't putting these guys in the best position to win. But Jaden Davis is a glaring hole in that with the corners. And now that we have DJ Graham back, he did an amazing job covering on the outside. And DTY was also very impactful. And a guy that we cannot forget in the pass rushing is Jalen Redmond. That dude is very important with how they rotate on that defensive line, with Grinch liking to rotate players in and out and having such a heavy rotation defense. having his group of four back in the middle with Perrion, Coe, Redmond, and Ellison was big when it comes to the run stopping game. And I think it showed this week.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I can think of those turnovers on, yeah, you said Pat Fields and Broyles, and then the fumble was the sack strip by Isaiah Thomas, which he just did it all himself. Those are the three I can think of. But yeah, I mean, it was great to see a couple, 3 turnovers. I know it was against a team that was on their, second string quarterback for a large portion of the game. Really someone that I saw, and I was reading it earlier in the week, was Key Lawrence. He just brought a lot of, he has the height, which that's been an issue with the defensive back room for a while now. And he's just a physical guy. He's got the height 6'1", around 6'1". He could play bump and run coverage, and you could just tell. And it was, obviously DJ Graham being back, but when Key Lawrence was in there, it just felt different. And with DTY also back there, and I know Pat Fields gets a lot of flack and everything, and he does make a few plays that kind of are head scratchers and whatnot, but he's been pretty consistent, and that's really what the Sooners need. They don't need a lockdown secondary quite right now. It's just more of keep everything in front of you, be able to cover for a little bit and let that defensive front get to him. And it seemed like Isaiah Thomas came out and was playing with his hair on fire. Obviously, you said Redmond. It just seemed like that they actually wanted to play. And it was finally the first time seeing all 4 quarters being played. And I don't know what they did to them. I know that there were some words probably had, meetings had, intense practices. I just felt like for the first 8 games, the Sooners have been just sleepwalking. And I think they finally got a good wake-up call against Kansas, which it's ridiculous that it took a wake-up call against Kansas to realize that we have to, something has to change. But and then they put Key Lawrence in there, and it just made a difference. And I like that Lincoln Riley said after that the patience is at 0 right now in the defensive back. It's just you got to get in there and you've got to produce. And it just, when Woody Washington comes back, I'm hoping for the Baylor game, you get Washington and you get DJ Graham and you've got Key Lawrence and DTY and Pat Fields. That secondary is actually pretty solid at that point. And I think we're going to really see him gel over these last 3 regular season games.
Yeah. And then quick correction for myself. We forced 2 fumbles, but only recovered 1. That's probably why. Obviously I had my stats wrong and you remembered the actual turnovers correctly. Then also something to mention, Texas Tech only made it look, or had 21 points because of a garbage time touchdown. Whatever you guys may say, like, at the end of the day, it didn't matter. We really only held them to 14 points whenever this team was going all out. And yes, you can say, well, they need to get used to going until the clock hits zeros at the end of the 4th quarter. And I'm sure that they will do that when the game is on the line. And it's important because they have done it before. I mean, earlier in the year, whenever we relied on them to make sure that we weren't going to lose games and our offense was struggling, they came up with plays. Nick Bonito was rushing hard to get QB hurries. IT was rushing hard. Like, when they need to step up and make a play, they do. And this game was, like Brumbaugh mentioned, just a good indication of what's to come post bye week with hopefully Woody coming back. But they will play all 4 quarters, hopefully for the rest of the season. And when it comes to playoff time, because this team is going to the playoffs, even at worst case scenario, we aren't undefeated. We're going to lose to a very good team in this stretch. I still expect this team to win another Big 12 championship. So they're going in the right direction. They're getting hot at the right time. Just like in baseball, if you're hot at the end of the season, you're going to have a great run at the playoffs. We're doing that at Oklahoma right now with the football team.
Yeah, it's finally nice to see this. I just think, and another thing you're talking about, I understand playing all 4 quarters and whatnot, but the Sooners have been so hurt, so many players have been hurt throughout the season, and being able to get off the field or get the starters out a little early and taking a few series off, that makes a big difference. I don't mind giving up a touchdown. You got to get the second and third team on the field, get them some experience, because the depth especially in the defensive back room is pretty thin right now. It's very thin. Anytime we can get some free time and not really meaning anything and getting those guys off the field to protect them from injury is perfect, because we've obviously have seen with DTY and Woody Washington and Billy Bowman out for a little bit and Cordell out and various other defensive backs out, it's become very obvious that the talent is there. It's just the experience and everything is just not there. And it becomes very evident. And if we want to, win these next 3 games and the Big 12 championship and eventually go win, a playoff game and potentially national championship, we have to be healthy. There's just not enough depth back there and across the whole defense. Now, in the next 3 years, I think there will be. It's just right now they're in the, they've turned the narrative around. It's just a matter of now building in behind it and making it a full, like a defensive powerhouse. We're just in that growing period. And people have gotten frustrated that we don't have extreme depth behind. And I get it, but when you hire someone, when you statistically have one of the worst defenses ever, it's a 5 to 6 year turnaround, building the depth program, and Grinch is on the cusp. And I think we got a taste of it. And that's why it's hurt so much, seeing this defense being so inconsistent and giving up, big plays and whatnot. Just, stay the course. And I really think you're going to see at the end of this year, they're going to really improve. And then really it's going to be next year where you're going to see they take the next step. And I mean, because you're seeing Ethan Downs play a lot, Danny Stutzman play a lot of young guys are playing meaningful snaps it's invaluable for the rest of their career.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, it's a very young team. We lost a lot of guys in the secondary too. Trey Norwood was a big part of the DBs, and as well as Trey Brown. Those guys were big players. And I know it's been a couple years, but Parnell Motley, people would roast him all the time when he was playing, but that dude came up with plays. And I think this DB room, while it's still very young, that is why the depth is so thin. They're very inexperienced. But next year, I agree with you that they will take their next step. And Grinch is doing, like you said, a full culture change. Like everyone's just kind of shifting their mentality. This is really the last year he has anyone that might have played with Mike Stoops. I believe this will be the last year anyone would have been in that period. So now he's getting next year it'll be everyone that he recruited, his guys in the entire defensive position groups. So they're on the right path. And something notable that we discussed before we started recording, Billy Bowman did not play very much this game, and he was replaced by Justin Broyles in that nickel spot. It'll be interesting to see what happens there, just because Billy Bowman's played a lot. And I think the reason he didn't play much, if at all, this game, and I apologize if he did play at all towards the end of the game, I don't remember, but I know every time I saw the sideline, he was usually standing up over there. I think it's because, like Lincoln said, there's no tolerance, zero patience with mistakes. And he has made quite a bit of mistakes over the last couple of games. And I think, again, it's because of the injuries we've had in the defensive back room. And he didn't get to play his true position, which is nickel. He was shifting around with outside and inside. So, I mean, if Justin Broyles is the better option for right now, great. But I think Billy Bowman is still going to be a great player for Oklahoma through his career as a Sooner.
Yeah, he was put in a position, and this goes on to the coaching staff too. I mean, Bowman was put in a spot to not succeed. I mean, to some degree, some of these players, they can only do so much, and if their coaches are not putting them in a spot to succeed, it's not totally on them. And I think that's what's happened to Bowman. But he was forced there because of out of necessity. They were looking for someone, and they tried Bowman. No, Now they tried Key Lawrence, and it seemed like, oh wait, okay, maybe we've got something here. And I mean, to some degree, it's on the coaches as well. But talking about for the next year, those safety positions, Pat Fields and DTY, we've seen how important DTY is. You take Pat Fields out, that's gonna be tough to replace. Not that we need to get down into going down that road, but yeah, the defense, they look good. They finally put 4 quarters together. They finally got up for a game that wasn't like a big time matchup, which was nice to finally see. We've got big time matchups the last 3 weeks. I don't think they'll have a hard time getting up for any of those games. Well, maybe in the 4th game for the Big 12 championship. Should have no motivation issues. They keep the intensity. There's no reason why this team doesn't run the table, at least in the Big 12.
I agree 100%. Do you have any more thoughts on the game before we wrap it up?
No, other than it was nice to watch the game and not be stressed and actually kind of sit back and enjoy it. It's nice to occasionally have a game like this.
Yep, we should have had 2 in a row, but at least we got one. Luckily, we've got a bye week. Hopefully, this gives all the guys time to rest, mentally, physically, and go into Baylor with just fresh legs and ready to fight, because these next 3 games are going to be the toughest of the year. We'll see where Baylor is ranked when it comes to next week, since they do have a game this weekend. But there is going to be the first official CFB rankings coming out tonight, Tuesday. So keep an eye out. It'll be interesting where Oklahoma's ranked. My prediction is we're probably going to be number 4, just because I feel like they're going to either force in Michigan State or they're going to force in Alabama over Oklahoma, and it'll be Georgia, Cincinnati, one of those 2 schools I just mentioned at 3, and then us.
This might be a hot take, but I would not be surprised to see Cincinnati outside of the top 4. I know people think it's going to be crazy, but OU's gotten dropped multiple times for not looking great. Cincinnati doesn't deserve passes for the past 2 weeks, because that Tulane game was closer than it looked. And I remember hearing a team that played a close game with Tulane. They got hammered for it. So yeah. I don't think Cincinnati is going to be in the playoffs the way that this race is turning out to be, but that's just me though.
Yeah, we'll see how everything ends up, and make sure to tune into the official rankings. I believe they're on ESPN, and I believe they're at 7 p.m. Central Time, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. So tune into that. Hopefully the Sooners are in a position that would help us in the long run. Hopefully, in my opinion, be a top 2 seed, because that could go a long way depending on how far we get into the playoffs, and hopefully get our first playoff win ever for the program, and get a national championship like the 3 of us predicted to start off the season. So that is everything for this video. If you guys made it this far, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Make sure to go down to the comment section. Let us know what you thought about the Texas game. Let us know your predictions on where we're going to be in the official college football playoff rankings. And before you leave, hit the like, hit the subscribe. As always, we appreciate when you do. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.